Now then, I'm Jules and welcome to the Wedding Mavericks podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm talking with Hannah from Brooke Photography. I connect with so much of what Hannah's gone through in her journey into her wedding business. But where her story is really inspiring is how she dealt with what we have all faced over the past year. She really did take lemons and make lemonade. Imagine deciding to follow your desire to become a photographer, learning from scratch on the side of your 9 to 5, building it up, ready to take the leap, to go full time into your business, and then just days after you've handed in your notice, the world goes into lockdown. But all that did is make Hannah even more determined to make a success of her business and find ways to navigate through the storm by making the most of the opportunities that presented themselves. What followed were hundreds of doorstep family photo shoots, creating and delivering a smartphone and beginner photography course online, whilst building a catalogue of wedding content through organising her own styled shoots based around her target couple and making the most of micro weddings. The result, an expanding network, organic marketing opportunities, and meeting her revenue targets in a situation that seemed impossible just a year ago. All of this while being a genuinely nice person with her joyful and expressive photography for warm-hearted people. We had a really good chat, and whatever stage of your business you're in, there are so many takeaways that you can take from this, particularly the inspiration to make it work by putting the work in. Let's jump into the conversation we had. So today on the podcast, I'm talking to Hannah Brooke, a photographer based in Yorkshire. Is it Wetherby you're from?
It is, yes. Hi.
Hello. So, Hannah, so that anybody who's listening or watching, if they've not met you before, do you just want to do a little bit of an introduction about your business, and if we start with kind of the sort of photography you do, where you're based and everything, and then a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so hi, I'm Hannah of Brooke Photography. I am based in Wetherby and I am a wedding and family photographer. Quite often combine the two, actually. A lot of my clients already seem to have their families and get married later, and often those are the people I photograph at the weddings too. I've been in business since the end of 2017. Built it up part-time alongside my day job, and then I had a nice busy wedding season to look forward in 2020. So I quit my day job in the January and had 2 weeks notice to work when lockdown hit.
Oof.
And yeah, a year later, I'm still here. I've actually had a reasonably successful first year in business. Wasn't the first year of business that I planned. I guess we'll come on and talk about what I did to bridge that gap. Yeah, my style of photography is joyful, expressive, colourful. I would say I'm primarily documentary style. I don't like awkward poses. I just love to kind of float around capturing candid, happy moments.
Brilliant. So, I guess one of the things that always comes up with a photographer is sort of how you got into that. So do you want to tell me about what your day job was and kind of what your background is, and then how photography kind of came about from that?
Yeah, sure. So my day job was in HR, and the idea came about, it was at the beginning of 2017, and I'd gone back to work after having my second child. And I was really unhappy. I knew that the corporate world was not the place for me anymore. And I knew that I wanted to work for myself. So I suppose I've probably approached it a different way to a lot of people, because I had the idea that I wanted to be a photographer before I even knew how to use the camera.
I can relate to this.
Yeah. So obviously I could take photographs. I was taking photographs on a little mini digital camera or my phone or whatever I could get hold of, really. And I have done all my life. But I hadn't ever purchased a big camera, as I call them.
Yeah.
But we had family portraits done, and I knew it was something that I had an interest in. And it was a bit of a light bulb moment, really, because I'd taken a picture of my own kids in the bath one night, posted it to my personal Facebook page, and loads of people replied to it saying, "This is amazing, you should set up business." And It was just like one of those, oh, yeah, that's what I should do moments, really. So, yeah, from that point, I looked into the camera that I needed, bought one, invested in training to learn how to use it. And then over that summer, I started doing portfolio building shoots. All the while, I was just looking at taking family photographs at the time, because I was a mother of 2 young kids. The people that were asking me to take photographs of their kids for the portfolios were obviously all families. And then in around about the September, somebody messaged me. And I'd done all of the business back-end stuff, like setting up a Facebook business page, Instagram, starting to get a website together. And somebody just messaged me and said, "Can I book a shoot?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. Actually, this is the point of it. I'm meant to be earning money from this." So, yeah, I did my first paid shoot at the end of, I think it was the October of 2017, so 6 months-ish after having the idea and putting all the work in. And then a few months later, somebody asked me to photograph the wedding. It was somebody that I knew. And I said to her, "I've never ever photographed a wedding." And she said, "That's fine. I've seen your work. I really like it. I really want you there at my day." So I put together a quote, what I thought was reasonable given my lack of experience. And, I wanted it to be relative to my experience, but also it's a long day, isn't it, shooting a wedding? So
it certainly is, yeah.
I wanted to make it something that was reasonable for my time. And I got really lucky with the venue. It was at Middleton Lodge, North Yorkshire. Beautiful place. And it was just amazing. And I remember really clearly standing there that day, clicking away behind the registrar doing the ceremony. And I just sort of had that second light bulb moment of thinking, this is what I'm meant to be doing in my life. It took me a long time to realise it, but this is a career that I could put my heart and soul into, never get bored of, and earn some decent money from. And then, after that, obviously, once I'd started doing weddings, I've got the bug. I second shot with another photographer a little bit that year and started to get my own bookings. I did a few of my own in 2019, started to get involved in style shoots, had 15 booked for 2020, which was enough for me at that point to quit the day job.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So
and here I am.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, because most photographers that you speak to, and having primarily doing video, I go to, I work alongside a different photographer at the majority of weddings I do. So, I usually have these sorts of conversations with them to find out, a bit about them. The most common thing that comes up is, my parents were into photography or whatever, or, I basically got into photography really early on. Some people study it as part of their, formal education and things. And I'm exactly the same as you. I literally decided I wanted to do this, and so I figured out how to do it. And it's just it's not a common, you don't hear that anywhere near as common as the other way. So, corporate HR, you were running alongside that, I'm guessing, for those first kind of couple of years while you're putting all these pieces together.
Yeah, I was. I actually changed jobs. So after I came back from that maternity leave, I was so unhappy in that job that I left, and I went and took a 12-month maternity cover somewhere else. And I was working 3 days a week, so it wasn't full-time, but then bear in mind I had
got the young kids.
2 small children. Yeah. Yeah, so I started just building up, working on weekends. I wasn't shooting every single weekend, but definitely have got busier as time's progressed. But yeah, I think 15 years in HR really sort of helped with the people skills that you need to run a business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that all that business knowledge has kind of stood me in good stead with the business end of it.
Yeah. So tell me about how you educated yourself then, because you said you didn't have any kind of knowledge about photography or using a camera, etc. It sounds very much similar to me. I had like a point and shoot type thing. I've always had like some sort of half decent camera, but never did I understand all the manual functions and proper photography skills, to do with lighting and composition. So how did you, up your skills? How did you learn all this stuff?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was enrolled on a introduction to DSLR course, which was at Leeds College of Art. And I don't believe they're running them anymore, which is a shame. It was kind of like night school, but on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And it was for 5 weeks through the summer, 5 Saturdays. And the chap that taught us everything that we needed to know about shooting in manual. It did have quite a heavy sort of studio focus to it. So we were doing a lot of the practicing on each other in the studio setup at the college.
Yeah.
Which I knew wasn't going to be my cup of tea long term, but it was really interesting to understand how things worked.
Yeah. And I can see the relevance of it as a starting point, because I think most people, particularly wedding photographers, I think if you asked the majority of wedding photographers, have you ever shot in a studio, they'd probably say no. And so actually having that as a starting point rather than learning, as in like more of a run and gun situation, is probably quite a good way to start. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I first bought the camera, I was shooting in auto and the pictures were just shocking. And I just did not understand how it worked at all. It was quite cringeworthy, really. But you have
everybody feels like that,
from, don't you? And and it's really good to look back at those early days pictures and see how the progression's been.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that I did. And then the second thing was I invested in some mentoring with a family photographer that I really respected and admired. So it felt like quite a bit of outgoings at first.
Yeah.
But because I knew that I wanted to one day make this my full-time job, it was a really worthwhile investment.
Yeah.
And that was probably more, we did do a little bit about the actual shooting and using of the camera, but it was more on the marketing and running a photography business.
Yeah.
And then, practice. So I've practiced like it's some sort of Olympic sport. Very rarely seen without this camera in my hand.
But that's good.
And it's amazing, isn't it? When you offer something for free. I remember putting a post on my Facebook page saying, would anyone like some, family photos? I'm building my portfolio. And I had to delete the post eventually because it was just
people just kept commenting.
Yeah. 3 years later, you're still doing those
free ones.
Still doing those free ones.
Brilliant. Yeah, and again, I can I totally I remember the first video I shot. It was like one of those Facebook posts, and then it was like I had to pick one, it was like, which is the best video, which is the best venue for me to go and shoot at. So it is amazing, isn't it? And that for some people, I've heard people talk and they'll frown upon doing freebies at the start and things like that. But for me, and obviously it sounds like this is what you did, doing those free jobs for the first few, or very kind of really low pay, it just takes all the pressure and stress away and allows you to just do what you.
That's right.
Explore it.
Completely, because it just allows you to practice with different models and build that portfolio, not feel under the pressure of oh my God, they're paying me hundreds of pounds for this, I better get it right.
Yeah.
Which is where we're at now with weddings.
Yeah. So you talked about being at that wedding and taking it from sort of looking at the family stuff to being at that wedding and thinking, yeah, I want to do this. And then you talked about, looking for these opportunities for the styled shoots and the portfolio building stuff. So tell me a bit about, how you found about those and how you got into doing those.
Yeah. Okay. So I joined a few Facebook groups that were for wedding photographers. I think there were some specific second shooting opportunity groups, and I was just looking to build up the portfolio really and offer myself out as a second shooter. But it turned out to be way harder to get those opportunities than I ever anticipated. Really, people not replying or saying yes, and then somebody would come along cheaper, and it just was quite a negative space. So I'm no longer in those groups. But within that, somebody did reply to my post and say, come along and join my group because it's for style shoots. If you want to build your portfolio, this is the way to go. And that person was Nicola Dixon, who used to run the Wild Ones workshops. So I joined that group, and it seemed like a much nicer space, and got myself onto the next available workshop, which was February of 2019.
Right.
I found it really interesting because attending a style shoot workshop, it's somebody else's concept and idea, and you just have to run with that and use it as a chance to really practice your photography skills, different angles, using the light, everything that we'd normally do. And obviously a wedding day is someone else's concept and idea, isn't it?
Yeah, so I can see the similarity there, yeah.
Yeah. So I loved it. It was a little bit intimidating at first because there was some really serious wedding photographers there, with huge Instagram followings. And I was like, oh God, little old me here. But I actually went back and re-edited those photographs recently because my style of editing's come on such a lot since.
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm really glad that I did 2 workshops with Nicola in that year, and re-edited both, having changed my editing style. And I loved it.
Yeah.
But then the next step on from that was starting to organise my own, because as I've talked about style, what I really wanted to get from those was building a portfolio of the types of weddings that I want to shoot.
Yeah.
And so I was looking for more. I wouldn't say they weren't not. What I found with them was obviously the models that you get on these workshops, they're gorgeous, aren't they? But not all. But somebody actually said to me, one of my friends said, God, I'm a bit intimidated now looking at your work because you're like shooting all these like super stunning people.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I don't want to put off potential customers because I'm all about the real life, honest moments. I don't Photoshop people to change their appearance. So I wanted to organise my own that were more kind of laid back, country wedding vibe, little bit festival style.
Yeah,
with normal looking people, I wanted to photograph like people of different shapes and sizes, not just have the size 10 models.
Absolutely.
Who are, an absolute dream to photograph, not knocking them at all. But I wanted to make sure that I was attracting what I consider my ideal client.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's a nice way to kind of tie into, I suppose we could go 2 ways there. You could talk about how you set up your own shoot and how you kind of found that and how you went about that. And also then if you want to roll onto that ideal client thing, because that's obviously something that comes up in branding and marketing a lot. But I think people have a different approach or idea in the head of how to deal with that. And I think that I know what yours is because I've looked at your website and the words that you use. It's just what you've been talking about. So how did you sort that shoot out then?
So it was the first one I did myself was in August 2020. So obviously we'd had lockdown, and we were starting to come out of lockdown number 1. Things were easing.
Yeah.
And we were able to get back to shooting. So I looked at a local venue that I'd been to as part of a networking group and liked, and all of the shoots that I organise are at venues that ultimately I want to shoot at.
Yeah.
So it was at Priory Barns, which is just outside of Wetherby, and the concept I had for it was like beautiful golden hour shots of the couple across the cornfields.
At Priory Cottages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been. Well, there's only one other place I can think of that's got the same sunsets. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So that's exactly what I had in my head. And again, a Facebook group. So I knew some suppliers, and others I kind of needed to find. So I'd gone on to a specific style shoot for wedding professionals Facebook group, and just put my mood board on there. Hello, I'm a photographer from Wetherby. This is what I'm looking for, makeup, hair, whatever it was. Loads of people replied and said, yeah, we'd love to be involved. A few that I hadn't even considered, like a McCrane backdrop lady contacted me and said, well, this sounds just like the right vibe. Do you think you could incorporate my work? So yeah, we pulled the shoot together. And the only thing that I was struggling with was getting a dress, because obviously bridal boutiques, they want to see some sort of evidence of you having done shoots yourself, looking after those dresses, because it's an expensive mistake, isn't it? If you shred or get mud all over someone's finest wedding gown.
Yeah. So
I actually bought the dress secondhand myself, and then sold it on eBay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't hugely expensive. It was quite a simple 2-piece dress, and then I sold it back on eBay afterwards. But that was enough then for bridal boutiques to say, yeah, fine, we'll lend you dresses for shoots after that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really good idea, that.
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier, you've got to be prepared to invest if you want to.
I'm glad you're saying that as well, because that's one thing that sometimes people are really afraid to, whether it's in educating yourself like that, or whether it's, your investment in that dress is basically marketing. It's the same as putting Facebook ads on or something like that. It's that's money. Right. It's spending a bit of money that's going to hopefully get you where you want to be and bring you money in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I used local suppliers. I have a few that I already knew, and a few new ones. And then I had my friend model and her husband, because I put a post on my Instagram stories saying I'm looking for people that fancy modelling for a wedding shoot. So one of my friends replied and said, yeah, I'd love this. So that's what we did.
Perfect.
One of the suppliers that I hadn't thought about but who approached me was a dog chaperone.
Right.
And she said, I'd love to, it's a dog-friendly venue. Do you think we could incorporate a dog in the wedding? And I was like, yeah, why not? I've got a black lab. Let's use her. So it was really laid back. There were some bits of it in hindsight that could have been a bit more cohesive. So I could have done more planning and bringing the supplier concepts together. So I'd given them like a colour palette and a mood board, and then they all went off and did their own things. and it worked. It did work, but it could have just been a little bit more like some of the colour tones weren't an exact match, and they were more worried about it than I was. And it was much more of a kind of a bride and groom shoot rather than a full-blown style shoot with table settings and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I then learnt after trying to submit it to a blog.
It's going to be harder to do.
Yeah. So, but at the time, I just wanted to get some bride and groom content on my portfolio because everything for 2020 had been cancelled.
Yeah.
Really, I was just looking to get those couple portraits.
Yeah, and that was going to be 2020 was going to be when you shot all those weddings and had all this extra stuff to show. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So that was my first one. It was organised within about a month. It was on a Tuesday afternoon. On the weather, I talked about the golden hour, so it was raining that day. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh God, what do we do?
Yeah.
And anyway, it's just one of those days where, where the rain clears and the clouds clear, and I got my golden hour.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Wow.
amazing. It was exactly what I'd envisaged.
Perfect.
And it was just like the clouds parted, and it's like, duh.
Meant to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Well,
so I did a couple more that summer
yeah.
and attended a few workshops that were kind of more of my style, which is where I first met you, wasn't it?
At Thicket Priory, yeah.
That's the one, yeah.
So the whole kind of organising your own styled shoot, that's a kind of a really kind of ballsy move, because I know what goes into those shoots, and I've often thought I'd love to create one myself, because it's only creating one yourself that you're actually going to shoot exactly what the images or the video that you've got in your head. Because like you say, otherwise it's like someone else's wedding or someone else's concept, isn't it? But I've always thought, because I've gone to enough of them and seen what goes into it, I've always thought, I just don't think I don't think I could manage all that, all the different, and like you say, you've got to, if you want to get it picked up by a blog or a magazine or something, you've got to show all those bits. And I suppose as well, you're showing all those bits for the other suppliers. And my, like you're saying, my main thing, when I go to a wedding, I don't focus on detail. I might get some to kind of help with the story. And I think that bride and grooms, they want that, because they spend all this money on stuff. They want to see some of it, but it's certainly not the big thing. The big thing for me is the people and stuff. So being able to do that yourself, I mean, that's brilliant.
I love it. It's kind of like planning your own wedding again, but you can be a bit bolder and a bit more daring.
Yeah.
And I've got two in the pipeline.
Right.
Coming up that one's on the 12th of April. It was always going to be on the 12th of April, so that was lucky. Yeah. Given the new timelines, and then the other one was meant to be in January, and we're in the process of just rearranging that.
That's good. So you've kind of been replacing those weddings that you should have done with this other content, which is obviously really important at your stage, because you were ready to really start pushing through the weddings and the sort of images that you wanted to shoot in the future to build your business on.
Yeah. And my goodness, if I hadn't have done that, so I had my own little wedding season last year. And if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have any content now.
Yeah, and I think that's so important for people to listen to, because if they're in a similar situation and they're starting out, to build their business in the way that you are, it could be quite easy just to put your hands in your head and be like, well, it's all just messed up now, but you've actually gone out and made something happen with it. Yeah. So to return to this ideal client, talk about the process of that, because you've obviously been quite specific there, and it's not necessarily the same specific as I would see quite often. I really buy into what you're saying. Your ideal client, what you're saying on your website. So tell me whereabouts that came from.
So I guess a lot of it came from me and what I was looking for when we looked for our wedding photographer. So, I'm somebody who's fairly relaxed in front of the camera. I wouldn't say I'm not camera shy, but I'm also not, I'm not somebody who takes loads and loads of photographs of myself. I take a few, but I really value photography though, and memories. Yeah. So that's my ideal client, is somebody that knows that they need to have those photographs and have the memories, and they're going to really love looking back on them in 5-10 years time with the kids or whoever. Again, similar to myself, someone who's fairly laid back and relaxed, and is just going to kind of let me do my thing. Doesn't have too many preconceptions of what sort of photographs. They haven't done the list of 100 required shots. They're just going to trust my judgment to capture everything for them. yeah, they're just people that just really want to get engrossed in each other and in kind of the day and sort of forget that I'm there. Yeah. Almost.
It sounds to me very much like authentic is kind of the word that encompasses all of that. But obviously as well, there's a lot of different types of authentic, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you say, it sounds like you're focusing more on the real memories of those people and things, that's exactly what I would want.
Yeah. Because when it's your own wedding day, you're sort of caught up in yourselves and each other, aren't you? And I know when we got our album back and I saw all the pictures of the guests having a real laugh at, the speeches and stuff. And I was like, oh, look at the faces. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I love is, because you don't notice that yourself on your day at all. You don't see all 100 or however many faces that you have all of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of making sure that obviously there's enough attention to the bride and groom, or bride and bride, or groom and groom, whatever, however it goes. But also everyone that's there and everyone that means something to them.
Very good. So is there anywhere that you kind of drew on for inspiration? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, other photographers. It can be anything. We can all find inspiration in different places. Like I take a lot of inspiration from music and things like that. So what is there anywhere or anything that kind of inspires you particularly?
I think as part of my course that I'm doing at the moment, I think I've realised that actually I take quite a lot of it, even though I'm not a landscape photographer, I take quite a lot of inspiration from like natural shooting in nature. Wherever I am at a venue, I'll always look for the greenery to get them outside and amongst the trees, even if we have to get on a little golf buggy and go for a little ride or something, or I have to take them in my car. I'm always inspired by being in nature.
Yeah. Is that because do you think that's because you've grown up in like a countryside location?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's where I'm kind of most relaxed and most at peace. So yeah, all of the weddings that I've had booked so far do tend to be, in countryside locations, not really city locations as such.
Yeah. Okay, that takes us nicely then into about the, when you're setting up your business and you're building your branding and marketing, and you're trying to get clients, how did you find that, and what approach did you take to kind of the marketing side of finding people, then finding you, getting yourself out there?
So at first, I relied quite heavily on word of mouth through social media. And that's probably where my first few bookings came from, really. I've always been a big fan of asking people to share. And not everybody will. Some people think, oh, here she goes again. But I do have a little core army of people that will share most things that I post.
Yeah.
And that just found my first few customers. Just going back to the ideal client thing, I guess at first I was like, well, I don't really want to have an ideal client. I want to appeal to everybody. And as the course of the business has gone on, I've realised that, you do kind of have to have an ideal client. Otherwise, you can't please everybody, can you?
No, but I do think that, there is, I do think, and this is probably not in line with what a lot of people will say, but I do think there can be more than one ideal client.
Totally, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm not, if somebody comes to me and they want to book me, I haven't yet got to that point where I'm like, are you absolutely exactly what I had, that client avatar. I'm not like that about it. I just kind of want to make sure that they understand my style of photography and that they're not going to ask me to change it.
Yeah, that's important as well, because you know that then this is what I've found. It's very unlikely that you're going to have anybody unhappy after the wedding day, because you've already met the expectation prior to the day. If that's not met though, there's always that chance that whatever it is you do might not be quite what they had in mind.
That's right. Yeah. And on the marketing and business side, again, that's something that I've had to invest quite a lot of time and a bit of money into learning and training myself on. So at first it was fine because it was my part-time side hustle. It was fine to just rely on word of mouth referrals and the odd booking through Facebook. But taking that step from doing it part-time to going full-time, I realised that I needed to invest a lot more time into my marketing and self-promotion. So I've really stepped up my game on Instagram because a lot of people seem to be booking wedding suppliers through there. I get a lot of inquiries from it. I still run my Facebook page alongside and get quite a lot through there, but less so on the weddings. That's more on the family side of things. And I did actually go to a wedding fair last March, the beginning of March, just before lockdown hit. It was at Rudding Park because it's a local venue to me, and I thought I'd really like to get some weddings booked there.
It's a lovely venue.
So what happened from that? Obviously, it was 2 weeks before the first lockdown, and I thought, I've invested all this time and money into getting everything I need to run a wedding fair stand.
Yeah.
And I don't know when I'm going to be able to do one again. And also, I didn't get any bookings straight away, but then I did get one. So towards the end of 2020, a girl got in touch with me, and she'd followed me on Instagram. She said, we met at Rudding Park and I want to book you, but it wasn't for Rudding Park. It was for, it was for a outdoorsy, wild teepee venue.
Right.
So it's perfect.
Yeah.
Ideal client, ideal venue. It wasn't Rudding Park.
Right.
And also, I know I'm talking about Rudding Park, which is quite a classy hotel. It doesn't also fit with that.
Doesn't fit with the ideal client thing, yeah.
Well, it kind of doesn't. I like venues that have got outside space, which Rudding has in Bucket List, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So then what happened from that, I found this out recently this week, that Rudding Park have been sending out my details to people that are booking weddings with them at the moment. Brilliant. And I've taken 2 bookings for Rudding Park this week.
That's fantastic.
Having never shot there before.
So are they like, have you sort of been put on their recommended suppliers list or something, or are they just sending out details because probably the last wedding fair they had was that one?
I think so, yeah. I'm going to get in touch with them and say thank you and try and work on that relationship.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of unbeknown to me, but then I had these 2 inquiries within 2 days of each other. I was like, hang on a minute, what's going on? So I asked one of them and she said, yeah, they're sending out your details and you're the one that we liked best.
Brilliant.
So I kind of think you reap what you sow, don't you?
Yeah.
So I had that thought and that intention that I wanted to book a wedding there. COVID got in the way a little bit, but because I'd taken those steps, it's now coming back. But I do need to find out who that person is and work on that relationship.
So it is interesting, that you did the wedding fair thing. So wedding fairs, they kind of generally I've become, my experience of them is a difficult one when you have to invest quite a lot of time and effort into a wedding fair. And there was a point where when I first started out, they worked really well. And then because social media became a lot more powerful, the wedding fairs didn't seem to be working. But what you've just said there is actually, it just made me think about it's, like how you're talking marketing about touch points and things. And actually, like you've just said, the attention that's come from that wasn't necessarily exactly what you expected, as in someone saw you and you probably thought, well, if people are going to book with me, it'll either be within a week or 2 of them going there.
Yeah.
But they hadn't booked their wedding yet. They hadn't even chosen the venue. And so you don't, it's only when you've actually gone through that experience that you realise it's handy to be in these places, isn't it? And get your face known, because then it leads to these other things.
Yeah, it is. And now that I'm a year on from that, and we've had the year we've had, and I've managed to get quite a lot of bookings just based on social media, I'm now not 100% sure where I go from here, whether I carry on doing some wedding fairs, or whether I carry on as I am. And it's because wedding fairs aren't coming back for a little while.
No.
Yet. You know, they're not going to be able to run these big in-person events straight away.
Yeah.
So it's something that I'm kind of parking for 2021, and I'll review in 22 if I need to.
So just going back to the wedding fair, how did you prepare for that? What did you do to, you talked about investing in sort of your stand and things like that.
So I had.
It's a while since I've gone through that process. So if you sort of want to talk about it, I think that'd be interesting in case people are wanting to go down that line.
Yeah. So I had some of my favourite images blown up and framed, and I put them on easels to show off my work.
Yeah.
I took my Mac and I had the slideshow running, and I invested in some, like a big roller banner of my branding.
Yeah.
Changed my branding since, so that's no use.
Yeah, I've done the same.
Yeah, and some flyers and brochures and things. I didn't invest in albums because that was such a huge investment. I thought I'd go along and see how this one went and make a decision as to whether I needed to. And I did come away from that thinking, I do need a couple of full wedding galleries to show people on the table.
Is that because you saw other photographers at the wedding fair that had them?
Yeah. I mean, it was quite intimidating at first because I was 2 tables down from a really well-known wedding photographer, like a 50 weddings a year guy. And he came with 2, the biggest TV screens you've ever seen in your life with his videos running. And I thought, I look like such an amateur. Really nice guy, had about 10 albums, and I was like, wow, that's how you do it. But it's also not my style.
Yeah, I don't think it is how you do it.
Not that flashy.
Yeah, I think it's just how that person does it, and I don't know who that person is, but I can imagine of who it might be, and that's okay because that works for them. But you're right. Yeah. That's not you, so you don't need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I know he got a booking that day, and so did I in the end, so job's a good one. I think if I do some in 2022, I will invest in a couple of my own albums to take.
Yeah.
Because what I did know was people were saying, well, have you got a full wedding gallery you can show me? They wanted to see the bridal prep, the details. But I just decided to turn up and be myself and just smile and chat to everybody. I was also on the next table to Blossom Tree Cakery. You come across them?
Right, I think I've heard them, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful cakes, and they had like loads of cakes to taste. So I also had like a massive queue next to me all the time, and I'd be like, oh, hi, trying to start conversations.
And people just want the free cake.
Yeah, we're just here for the cake. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in that situation too.
Yeah. So, but I did speak to the guys at that stand quite a lot before it started. It was a really busy wedding fair, and they gave me loads of advice. And I spoke to the other photographers. I spoke to the guy, and asked them all for their advice, because I do have the belief that there is enough room for us all.
Yeah. And
we have all got different styles and targets, and I know I don't want to be a 50 wedding a year person at all. 15 to 20 is enough for me.
And that's the thing, these events, even though like they might not always be perfect from a marketing perspective, they are, all those networking type situations are very useful. There's always something that, wherever you go, there's always something that can be gained from it, whether it's a contact with another, supplier, or, whether, you do see people there that see your work, and like you said, they didn't inquire straight away, but later down the line, you could do a post on social media and that will refresh that person, or they, it's amazing how these things that I've come away from some wedding fairs sometimes thinking I've just wasted literally a day of my life, I spoke to 8 people, it might be a little quiet one, but then something has come from it in some respect, and you've built some sort of contact or something. So it's definitely worth doing.
And that's a good point that you just made, actually, because I did speak to a friend who's a wedding professional. She runs like a neon light company. I asked her for advice on which ones would be good to attend, because I knew she attends lots.
Yeah.
And she'd said just that, make sure it's going to be a busy, well-attended one. So she'd recommended a few key hotels to go to, Rudding being one of them. Because she said, you don't want to lose confidence by going to one where it's quiet and you're not speaking to people and you're feeling just like you've described.
Yeah.
But she said, on the other hand, you could go to that and you could get 2 bookings. So it's really, they can be so hit and miss. Yeah.
So just to kind of go back to something you just said, because I'm interested to there's a bit of a myth amongst particularly wedding photographers and videographers, is that busy is like, everyone wants to be busy. Everyone makes out that they're really busy. And there's, there's nothing wrong with being really busy. But it's just interesting because you said, I don't want to do 50 weddings a year. And I totally understand that. I don't want to do 50 weddings a year either. What is it that, what's your sort of thought process in that? Is that like, I want to be able to just not be super stressed out and be able to do a nice focused job? Or is it a case of, I don't know. I get it, but sometimes I think, I don't know about you, I sometimes look and people will be talking about being busy, and it just, I having been busy a few times, I've been like, I don't want to be that busy. I don't know why people talk about it like it's some sort of badge of honor.
Yeah, no, I don't want to be stressed out. I came into this business because I love it, and I don't want to get to the point where it becomes that busy that I stop loving it.
Yeah.
Also, it's family. My kids are still only 6 and 4 now. So I want to make sure that I'm around, that I spent some time with them, that I wasn't off every single weekend. Because 50 weddings a year, we both know that's not one every week, is it? It's 2.
Yeah.
It's Friday, Saturday, through the summer, and then your wedding fair on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking anybody who chooses to do that at all. It's absolutely, everyone's got their own choices, and they might choose to retire early or whatever and spend all the time with family. But I just don't want to be stressed out with it, and I want to do a good job. I don't want to end up with such a massive editing pile that I can't keep on top of it.
Yeah.
But also remembering I am a wedding and family photographer, so I've still got quite a lot of family bookings in the diary as well.
Which is perfect, isn't it? Because that for me is that, it's that the family stuff isn't always weekends, so it gives you that as well as like multiple revenue streams, if you like. You've also got that you can fill your calendar up a little more evenly throughout the year and throughout the week.
That's it. Yeah. So it's just trying to keep some sort of balance, and because I'm still quite early in business, because of the year that we've just had, I've not actually got to that point where I've had to start turning work down because there's too many in the diary.
Yeah.
I'm not far off for this year.
That's good.
But then it's a catch-up year, isn't it? So I'm like, I'll probably just see how this year goes. And a lot of the weddings that I've got in are still going to be very small.
Right. They're still did they book?
Yeah, I've still got a few happening in April where they're just having the ceremony.
Right. That's good. I mean, it's good. It's good that you've got some that are coming up,
Yeah.
I think nearly all of mine have moved to the second half of the year. So I'm just thinking, it doesn't give you much to new content for this bit, and it'd be nice to spread it out a bit more. So that's good that you've got some that are a little bit smaller.
Yes, yeah, and then the rest of them did move to the second half of the year, but a lot of them moved to weekdays.
Yeah, well, that's all that's left now.
yeah, but but then the new bookings that have come in from Rudding have been on weekends in the middle of summer, and I'm like, how's that possible?
Right?
How have they got those dates free?
Very good.
So it's strange at the moment.
So we're talking about, what happened last year and it's spilled into this year. So you've gone all in on going into wedding photography. You've quit your job.
Yeah.
Did you make that decision and hand your notice in just before the lockdown? Is that kind of...
Handed my notice in on the 6th of January 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
So pretty much when your notice period's up, that's when the lockdown sort of started.
I had 2 weeks left to work.
Crikey.
Yeah. Yeah, I shot a wedding the day before lockdown was announced, that Saturday.
Right.
So it was tense because we knew the pubs had closed on the Friday, but not hotels. And we knew that it was coming, and it was like, oh God, the bride and groom were stressed out by it. I was stressed out, and it was like, well,
because you didn't know if the wedding was going to happen.
Yeah, and then even on the day they were like, this, it doesn't quite feel right, but we lose everything if we don't do it now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a beautiful day. And yeah, it was. So looking back, I thought that was going to be my only one in 2020.
But you did do some others. Did you manage to do some?
I did some micro weddings at the back end of the year. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. So tell me, what's going through your head then at that point? Because I mean, I know how I kind of felt, and I didn't have any other options, and I was well out of my old job. But that's got to be a very confusing situation where you're thinking, crikey, in a matter of weeks.
I came home from work, so we were all told to go and work from home. And I went home from work on Monday the 16th of March. And my husband was working away in London. I'd put the kids to bed and I sat and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I was like, what have I made this stupid decision for? Why would I quit a stable job? And everything in my head at that point was, I've taken so many risks and it was just stupid. But I got over myself, as I always do when I'm stressed. And I've never regretted it. After that point,
God.
I've never regretted it for the whole year, because actually I did pick myself up and change my offer and work around what I could offer in terms of photography.
Yep.
Adapt. And yeah, absolutely adapted to the circumstances.
Which if you've learnt to do that, then you'll be fine with whatever comes in the future.
Yeah, I think I was just in deep shock. I was really just I just couldn't believe this was happening. Could any of us? It was just crazy, wasn't it?
Yep.
It seemed like something that was just happening at the other side of the world. It wasn't ever going to affect us, and then suddenly it was affecting us.
Yeah.
Dramatically.
So tell me what you did then. What are these practical steps that you took? Or it probably wasn't one big thing, but how did you find your way through it? Because I know how for lots of people, and I can definitely, when you said you were in shock and you were like, what have I done? And I wasn't even. I hadn't even just quit my job. I'd already left it way behind. But I was even thinking, after I'd left my job a few years before, and I was thinking, whoa, like you said, I've taken this huge risk. And I don't think I saw it as a huge risk until then, because I had like you had a career, and I earned a decent wage, and it was secure and everything, and then this happened. And I thought, my family, we're going to end up struggling.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do?
Yeah, well, we were struggling because I'd quit my job. I went back and spoke to my employer, first of all, about furlough, and it wasn't an option. They just, it's flat no.
Right.
They kept me on for a couple more weeks. But actually that was really stressful because the kids were at home.
Yeah.
And my husband was trying to work. So I was quite glad when they said, yeah, that's coming to an end now. You've got to leave. Your time's up. So I'd heard quite a lot of, in some of the networking groups I'm in, the conversation was all around, right, now's the time to build your community. And I was thinking, right, I've got to build a community. how do I do that? So I was trying to kind of get something going on Facebook in a group, just like, let's document lockdown. And a few of my friends, my trusty old friends joined me, and a few of them said, well, we could do with you to teach us how to take photos. So the first thing I did was put together a smartphone photography course online, and then, put it out there, and quite a few people signed up for it, because it's not an expensive ticket price. And I'm sure a few of them just felt sorry for me and just wanted to do whatever they could to support my business. But quite a lot of them were like, wow, I'm getting some really good tips here. And I did not know that you could just kind of take these shortcuts and how to make the photograph so much better. So that was my first thing that I did. And then, but I was bored. I went into this business because I love taking photographs. So then I was like, I need something to photograph. And everybody in my house was sick of me at that point. So I'd seen doorstep photographs again on different Facebook groups. And at first I thought, oh, they're not for me. They're a bit naff. And, a week later I was bored. So I put something in the school mum's WhatsApp chat and said, does anyone fancy me on my daily exercise, coming with the camera and walking past your house and taking a photo? And of course, everybody was like, yeah, totally. So
brilliant.
And that was for free at first. It was just for fun for me. But then people started inquiring, from the next village along, saying, well, do you think, I've just had a baby, do you think you could come to me? How much is it?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is what's going to get me through. So I started charging a small amount, and I was going on my bike all over the place. Because the first lockdown was really different, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Nobody
it was, yeah.
going anywhere in the cars. We're all scared to do stuff. And it was beautiful. It was gorgeous weather, and I was off on my bike with my camera strapped to my back. And I did. So I'm currently on about 370.
No way.
Doorstep shoots.
Seriously?
Yeah. Across the last year.
Goodness me. I wouldn't have. That's amazing.
Yeah, it made up for lost wedding income.
Wow.
So, and people were doing them for charity and all sorts, which again is really noble. But I was thinking, this is survival for me, because my husband had to take a pay cut in his job.
Yeah.
For his firm to survive. And I was like, I need to earn some money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I went crazy on the doorstep shoots. And
That's amazing.
The vast majority, about 370, were lockdown 1. And then when the November lockdown hit, I brought them back for a little festive edition, just for fun. And then January happened, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And I thought, I've already got the answer here. I've been doing it. Just carry on.
That's great.
I've only done them through lockdowns and stopping.
I can't believe there's that many. That's a big number.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even know how to reach that many people. It was word of mouth.
Yeah. So they obviously were posting the pictures online, and then somebody else would get in touch and say, "Oh, I've seen Jules's family pictures. Can you come to my house and do that?"
That's brilliant.
And then I'd say, well, yeah, have you got a little Facebook group, a local one that you can just share it in and see? And then it just snowballed.
Snowball from there.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So, you've had this year, but it's given you this opportunity to explore things that you would have never done and
never dreamed of.
Yeah. And to be fair, you might have done these doorstep photos, and they might not have been some of them you started doing for free, and then I'm guessing you weren't getting wedding income from them, but you've managed to those 370 people. They'll probably want photos. A lot of those will probably want photos.
They have done,
or
yeah.
they'll get married or whatever.
That's right. So out of that, I have had a couple of wedding bookings.
Brilliant.
And quite a lot of proper full family shoots afterwards.
Yeah. Wow.
So not all 370, when you're dealing with numbers like that, you have to respect and understand. Some of them already had a designated photographer that they would favour. Some of them could only afford a £25 family shoot, and that's all it was. And some of them were just doing it because it was sort of jumping on the bandwagon. But yeah, out of that, I've made friends, I've made like long-term customers, I've made some really good relationships.
Yeah. And that's the kind of well, it's not a case of unforeseen, but it's the thing that comes out of something that you weren't, it wasn't really the thing that you went into it for. And it's giving you time to do your smartphone course, and now you're doing the camera course for beginners. So, tell me about that, because you wouldn't have had the time to do that, I'm guessing, if it had been a normal wedding year.
No, so yeah, that's right. So that was an idea I've had in my head for a long time, because again, people saying, I've got a big camera, I could do with you to teach me how to use it. So I had this idea of, right, at some point I'll get the content for that on the course. And lockdown would have happened, and then the summer came along and we're all eating out to help out, weren't we? And sort of getting back to normal in a sense. And I was really busy. I had a really, really busy autumn with family shoots and, like I said, a few micro weddings. And everything was like going great guns. And then we started to go into local lockdown around here, didn't we? And tier 3, and we're not going to go on about it, but everything sort of ground to a halt again. And it was like,
just man. When it was getting momentum up,
Yeah, so I was like, right, well, now's the time I get this content online and get that launched. And it has been a lot of work. I had to write all my ideas down, get them in a logical order, find photographs that I've taken that would sit alongside those, because I like to be very practical and obviously visual. It's a photography course. And then record the audio. And that last bit has been the most challenging, because I've needed to have quiet in the house. Which
is hard when the kids are around.
But and then when they're in bed, I don't want to disturb them by recording a load of audio. So that's been the most challenging. But it's on track. So the course is launched. They're on week 1 now, and I'm recording the audio for week 5 now. So I've sort of had the year where it wasn't finished, but I needed to launch.
Yeah. And it's keeping you going as well. It's keeping you busy. It's keeping your mind occupied. One of the biggest struggles is going to have been for people to keep motivated and keep the kind of positive mental health going. Because, especially like, I know how I felt around the back end of last year, sort of really kind of around the Christmas period. I was just thinking, this is even now, like, I sort of think, I can't believe this has happened,
I know.
But it's, I've started this podcast and got other sort of ideas that I've been able to work on. You've done all that stuff. And I think that, you have to look at the things that can come out of such a situation. Not all the negatives. So a few kind of roundup type of questions that I try to ask everyone to see if they're like themes and things that come out of it. So what would you say, like the successful attributes, or the attributes of a successful kind of person in the wedding industry, or, you can say wedding photographer because that's what you do, but is there things that stand out to you as like, these are really important?
Yeah. I think you've got to be really great at networking, because you've touched on it earlier, making those connections and meeting other wedding suppliers, even people in your own field. You're going to get a lot of referrals. A lot of the word of mouth stuff will come from that, because if it's another photographer and they're booked, then they will then think to refer them to somebody else that they know will do a good job.
Exactly, yeah.
I think you've got to have a positive attitude, and you've got to be prepared to work really hard, because it is hard work.
Yep.
It's long days. And people often say to me that are not in the industry, like, but it's weekends, isn't it? And it's long days. And I'm like, yeah, it is, but I love it. So it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't feel like a long day when you're doing something that you love.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't buy into that whole find a job you love and you'll never do another day's work in your life theory. I think that's...
it's definitely work.
It's definitely work, yeah, absolutely. And it can be really hard work, and it can be stressful at times, you know, because you've got to back yourself, haven't you?
Yeah.
But it is worthwhile work to me.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. Have I answered the question there?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. So is there any like advice that you'd give yourself? Bearing in mind you've kind of come into it later on in your working life, haven't you? You haven't set out from scratch to do it. So is there anything you'd tell your past self?
To just go for it and believe in yourself, and not get too caught up on what everyone else is doing. You know, it's really easy to spend hours and hours falling into the Instagram rabbit hole, looking at other people's pictures. And also not to base your style on what you believe a successful person is doing. Yeah. So I've seen that a lot, where there are people sort of shooting and editing in the same way, and everything looks a bit sameish.
Yeah, well, because it's there's a lot of trends.
Yeah, trend-based, yeah. And it's nice. It's really beautiful work, but it doesn't make them that memorable.
Yeah.
So kind of stick to your own guns, you know, and believe that there is somebody for everybody. Yeah. And there's room for us all. And just sort of stick to that style that you know is right for yourself. That's
really great to hear, but I don't hear that very often because it's like I totally agree. When you look through a social media feed or something, there is like, this is what's cool at the moment, so everybody's trying to emulate that, and that there's nothing wrong with that, because like you said, I go, yeah, that looks great, and there's this little bit of you that'll be like, I want to do it like that because that's what everybody seems to like at the moment. But then you're right. Then you sort of bring yourself back in and you're like, no, because I won't enjoy it the same then.
Yeah, exactly. The other bit of advice that I would give myself if I was starting out again is to charge a bit more earlier on. So
it's easier said than done, but the best piece of advice.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky balance because you feel like you've got to have the experience. But I'm now in a situation where, because people have had to postpone, you talked about it in one of your previous podcasts, where people have booked in 2018 for 2020, and then it's going into the back end of 21. Yeah. It's like 3 years. And I wish I'd just got a bit better at kind of projecting what my annual increment might be, because I'd charged them my 2018 price. Yeah.
It's funny because, and that is so true. I mean, the thing is, it is pricing's difficult, and it doesn't get any easier. Even when you get to being established and you've been doing it for a while, and you know that you've booked weddings at much higher prices than you could have even thought you would be able to. You still have the same problem in your head of, like, it's been a few weeks and you might not have got a booking, and you've put your prices up a bit, and you're thinking, nah, that none of these inquiries have booked me. They're not gonna. So it's always the same. It doesn't matter what stage you're at. You're always going to have that same kind of doubt. But it does come down to what you've just said, and obviously you're referencing something I said before, which the pandemic's highlighted the problem with pricing yourself too low for too long, if you like. It's okay for a couple of weddings that are going to happen imminently while you're starting out, but when this happens, and there are weddings that are moving 3 years, you're stuck in a 3-year pricing situation, and you're going to be a different person at that point.
That's it, and it's not their fault.
No.
And they're now getting a bargain, because what they're paying for and what they're going to get
is different,
is different. But they're lovely people, so I'm not gonna hold it against them. I'm not gonna do any less of a good job.
You've just got to, in that situation, you've just got to think, though I know when you go do those weddings, you'll do an amazing job, and that will lead to more things happening.
Yeah,
and that's how you've got
completely.
to look at it. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's
what I mean. Yeah.
It is a problem if you're relying on your business progressing so that financially you can, you can support yourself, so that you can run the business sustainably. Like, one of the things I talk about the most with anybody is sustainability, because I think that's the thing that's missing in the wedding industry. Doesn't matter what your service you provide, people literally don't realise that it looks okay at this point, and then 3, 4, 5 years later, if you haven't worked out how much all your costs are and how much you need to bring into the house to make it worth your while, you're not going to want to be doing it, let alone be able to do it, because it's not going to work.
That's it.
So what I usually sort of ask what 2020's taught you, but I think we've talked about that, and I think the way that you've adapted to it, especially so early on in your business, you've already kind of, I can see that going forward you'll always be finding new opportunities and things like that. Where do you see it going? Do you have a plan? Have you thought about where things go in the future? You've obviously left a career behind, so this is what you want to do. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, and I've actually been offered a couple of occasions to go back into HR.
Right.
From lovely people I used to work with, saying, I've got this opportunity. I know things are tough, but now I'm sticking to my guns. I'm sticking with what I love, and I'm backing myself. So the plan is to consistently book that 15 to 20 weddings a year, and I know that with the work that I'm doing on the marketing, it will bring through those ideal clients. So I know that the style will probably evolve over the next couple of years. And probably, I think right now the goal is to move to probably have a higher proportion of my work coming from weddings than it is from the families. It's not to say that I'll ever leave those behind, but it'll probably end up being my wedding clients that then come back with family bookings, if that makes sense.
Rather than the other way around.
Yeah. I probably won't be marketing quite so heavily on family side, but then, on the other hand, it's useful because it plugs the gaps through the winter months when weddings are quieter.
Yeah.
But I do see it going that I'll probably do like, I don't know, 60-40 weddings to families, or maybe even a little bit more than that. I'll always keep the family work. Yeah. But just not maybe quite so intensive, because I'm going to be charging more for that too.
And that's it. And it's great because you've got it all mapped out. Well, you might not have it all mapped out, but you've got a very kind of solid foundation of what you're planning to do. The podcast, actually, I don't know when this one will go out, but the one that I've released today, which is at the start of March, actually is a hairstylist called Hannah as well. She's done some, she's really, in the last 3 years, has done some amazing things with her business. And she actually said she just writes down stuff that she wants to be able to do. She doesn't know if she's going to be able to do it or how she's going to do it. But she says she's written these things, she'll write these things down. And she's made them all happen. There is something in that. So I've got a vision board in my office, which I need to update. Right. Because it was written 3 years ago. And the monthly income amount I've achieved every month this year, despite everything. This. Right.
But when I wrote it felt like a really scary goal. It felt unachievable. But I think the fact that it's just there, sitting just out of view, just above my back, I can see it, and I think there is something in that. Yeah, and if you've managed to do that in this year, then you're not going to have a problem going forward. Hopefully not, no. Right, well, it's been lovely to talk to you. You too. I really, really connect with your images, your ethos for, how you approach it. I love that genuine and uniqueness,
not having to follow the trends and things. So it's very refreshing, and I can really connect with that. Lovely talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Okay, that was this week's podcast with Hannah Brooke Photography. If you want to check her out, it's hannahbrookephotography.co.uk. As well as her family, branding and wedding photography, you can also access her online courses on there. So if you want to learn how to take better photos with your phone, or how to learn to use your camera in manual mode, go check that out. Particularly for any any suppliers that aren't necessarily photographers that are looking to be able to take better photos of their own branding, of their own work, that could be really useful for you. If you'd like to find out more about the Wedding Mavericks, check us out at weddingmavericks.com. We're on the socials at Wedding Mavericks, Instagram and Facebook. And you can also watch these episodes on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to help us grow the podcast, please share it with others that might be of use to. And if you get a chance, leave us a review on your podcatcher. Right, thank you for listening to the podcast, and I'll catch you on next week's episode. See ya.